everyone, and welcome to National Treasure Hunt, the podcast where the secret lies not only with Charlotte, but also with your co-hosts. I'm Aubrey.
And I'm Emily.
And we are back with our very first National Treasure in Real Life, or NTIRL episode of Season 13.
Yes, and you all know these are my favorite episodes to record. I am historically, of the two of us, the one that loves watching these docu-series.
Yeah.
So this is I was pumped about this one. Yeah.
I mean, dude, Emily, we had to push this recording by a week because you were so into the show.
I was into it. I was more into it than I had been previously, and then was reminded why I did not like it nearly 2 episodes later.
Okay, well, for those who might be newcomers here, Emily has been sarcastic this entire time so far. She hates docuseries, and that is exactly what NTIRL is. We are reviewing treasure hunt style docuseries, oftentimes ones that you recommend to us, comparing them to National Treasure and telling you, as a National Treasure fan, whether or not you might want to watch them. And today on the docket, we are continuing on with The Curse of Oak Island, this time reviewing seasons 5 and 6. I do want to take one quick moment, though, before we get into the meat of this episode, and say that in the time we were watching these seasons and prepping for this episode, I know this episode is going to come out much later. I'm kind of dating us right now. But at the time of our prep for this episode, I wanted to acknowledge that Dwayne Ollinger, who is one of the main characters from Mystery at Blind Frog Ranch, a show that we have previously covered on NTIRL, he passed away this spring following a series of health complications. So I did want to take a moment to just acknowledge that and say that's a major bummer, not just because anyone passing away is a major bummer, but also just for the sake of that treasure hunt. I do wonder where that's going to go from here.
We'll have to see. If we do another NTIRL on it, you'll know that the show kept going.
Show must go on, yeah. Okay, so with that out of the way, we do need to get to just a little bit of business before we talk about The Curse of Oak Island, because, guys, we have a lot of stuff coming up.
We do. And if you want to keep track of all of that stuff, because maybe you're listening to this in the car and can't just write stuff down now, you can follow us on X and Instagram and YouTube at NT Hunt Podcast. That YouTube one, very important. I did not spend 10 minutes at the beginning of this recording session with Aubrey trying to get my lighting just right for none of you to be watching us. So please check us out on YouTube. That is at NT Hunt Podcast. You can also check out our website, nthuntpodcast.com, where you can find information about our books and upcoming events, of which, as Aubrey alluded to, there are many.
This is Aubrey from the future here, just making sure you know the full schedule of events of what's happening for Philadelphia's National Treasure Weekend from August 20th to the 22nd, because you guys, if you are local to Philly or if you've been looking for an excuse to visit, we really do hope to see you there. This is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime weekend. All right, so on Thursday, August 20th, you have National Treasure Hunt's Heist Night, our immersive puzzle experience happening at historic Carpenter's Hall. Then we come back on Friday for, get this, you guys, a live recording of the National Treasure Hunt podcast featuring not just Emily and myself, but our very good friend, National Treasure Director Jon Turteltaub, and he will be taking your questions. So you're going to want to be in that audience. That's happening at the Liberty View at Independence Visitor Center. So as soon as that podcast recording is over, you can step outside of the venue, be on Independence Mall for the third event of the weekend, which is a free screening of National Treasure introduced by Jon himself. And then come back on Saturday, August 22nd, and we have literally a full day of National Treasure activities for you. First and foremost, we have a special installment of the National Treasure Hunt Tour in Philadelphia, taking you through Old City and Center City that goes from mid-morning to mid-afternoon. After that, you can join us for another heist night at Carpenter's Hall. This is the same as the first one, but in case you couldn't make it on Thursday, we're giving you a second chance. And then after heist night, you have one more opportunity, one more event, and that is a free screening of National Treasure Book of Secrets back on Independence Mall, once again introduced by Jon Turteltaub. You guys, many of these events require tickets, and they are going very quickly. So any tickets that are still available at the time that this episode is hitting your ears, you're going to find those tickets at the show notes for this episode or on our website at nthuntpodcast.com/events. All right, back to the show. And that's not even enough. We still have more coming up.
Of course, we always have more coming.
So we actually have our regularly scheduled fall National Treasure Hunt tour in Philly happening on September 19th, and our fall National Treasure Hunt tour in Washington, D.C. on October 17th, which is completely different from the Philadelphia tour. So you're going to want to register for those tours also at the link in our show notes today.
Yeah, and y'all, both of these, not that the event that's coming up this weekend is going to be fantastic, but these tours are special. And they're special because for the first time since we have done National Treasure Hunt tours, Aubrey and I will be living in the same state. So our Philly tour is going to be the first one where we are both co-residents of Pennsylvania since college. And our DC tour is going to be the first one where maybe Aubrey and I share a hotel room the night before.
Touche. I had not even gotten that far yet, to be honest.
Yeah, you're moving, not me. So
yeah, as the time of this recording, you guys, I have not yet moved. So this is a great time.
It's coming to you from DC on Aubrey's end.
Okay. All right. Well, with all of that out of the way, let's dive into The Curse of Oak Island seasons 5 and 6. As a reminder, we're going to start by giving you some basic information about the show at hand and where to watch. And then we'll go through and talk through the most memorable moments, the things that we liked and didn't like. And then we will end with our rating and tell you whether or not you should watch these seasons. So once again, Curse of Oak Island. It's still a History Channel series, so you can still watch it on history.com. You can also find it on Tubi, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and many other places. Season 5 was 18 episodes, and it premiered in 2017. And Season 6, which was a whopping 22 episodes, came out in 2018. I will say, have you noticed every season that we've watched so far, the episode number has increased. And I feel like that's a clear indication of the show performing well for History Channel.
Oh, I've noticed. Because it's more that I get to watch. Yes, I have noticed that, which is interesting. I think we can come back to this, but I do have some feelings that it could have been less, especially season 6 could have been less than 22 episodes and we would have been okay. But I do obviously want to also point out, for those of you that are keeping track and don't know about the show, these seasons came out in 2017 and 2018. There are 13 as of now seasons of this show. So we didn't find the treasure in seasons 5 and 6.
You say that every time we do one of these recordings, and
I just want people to know.
We're going to get there because we do have to review what they find, and I assume that if they found the treasure, it would be a big enough find that we'd have to talk about it, unless this is a no spoilers, episode.
Not no spoilers. Sorry, y'all. In case you were moving on to season 7, they don't find the treasure there either.
I will say we always like to start these episodes as well by reviewing the key characters because we are going to be saying people's names. I'll say go back to our other NTIRLs about this show for a lengthier overview. In brief, the brothers Rick and Marty Lagina are still our main protagonists here. And as far as if there are any significant additions this season, Gary Drayton stood out to me. He is their metal detecting expert. He's been on the show before, but he became a fixture in these seasons.
So I remember liking Gary
Mhm.
previously, and I just have to say, Gary, you're great. Um, Personally, I found his presence very calming in like the amount of just stuff that was happening whenever we were in I don't want to say a scene, but like whenever we were in a side quest or a main quest with Gary, I was like, I'm in good hands, and so hopefully is this treasure. He also seemed to be led by science. I will
I
talk more about it, but
Okay, because I honestly have a slightly different view than you on that. I, yeah, okay, we'll hold on. We'll hold that. Hold that thought.
crazy.
I will say the thing that stands out to me about Gary is a very strong accent, and sometimes it means that he has like not trouble with certain words. Although there was one word I can't remember it. I wish I had written it down where he was saying it. I was like, that is not the word you think it is. But like the word that comes to mind for me, especially for him, is when he says button. But
He says button a lot.
but because he finds a lot of buttons, is what
Button.
it's.
Button. It kind of sounds like he's from like Oliver Twist,
I
like that time
know.
period. Just when he says that word.
Just
Button.
that one. Yeah, yeah. Okay. The other new main addition I would say is Laird Niven, who is an archaeologist. More on him later because why he becomes involved is pretty important, and I think we're going to talk about it. I will just take this moment on the characters to say that I still viscerally despise Dave Blankenship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will just one quote that happened in, I think it was season 5, that is the epitome of why I hate him. There was a conversation happening about like um how they're on the treasure hunt, but they're also on like an information hunt, right? Trying to figure out the history of what happened here. And he literally says, let's go 60-40. 60 on the treasure, 40 on the BS. And on the BS, he's talking about the history. I literally despise him, but fortunately, he is almost absent in season 6 for reasons I do not understand.
Maybe he did not perform well for viewers, and
He's
so they cut his scenes.
so unlikable. He's so
I'm also
unlikable.
wondering, like, if they specifically, like, picked some of the more unlikable things that he said to show. Because, like, you know, it's good to have not a villain, but it's good to have someone that's, like, opposite.
I guess. I mean, if they're picking just those things, they're giving him a clear villain edit because almost everything that comes out of his mouth is something cynical and rude. But anyway, let's dive in. The first thing that I would really like to talk about is I'm going to call these disasters and challenges because we see a lot of hurdles um, and problems, some very sad, some frustrating, especially in season 5. Um, the first of which is absolutely unavoidable. We learn that Craig Tester, who's one of the main characters, Marty's business partner, Craig's 16-year-old son died a few months before season 5 following, I think they said, an epileptic seizure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this was like, I mean, so sad to hear. Obviously, now it's been some time, but I didn't watch this originally. So,
Yeah.
you know, learning that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this, it feels like it just kind of got real. I think it's easy to forget that these people have like real lives outside of just doing this.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was a big question of whether Craig was going to be involved in season 5, to me was like, oh
Yeah.
crap, like this is a big deal.
For sure. And I thought it was really interesting how they discussed Craig's involvement as like almost a distraction,
Hmm.
almost like, you know, what would the son have wanted? His name was Drake. What would Drake have wanted? Um, and not to minimize this at all, but I was struck by this feeling of treasure tragedy that we see in National Treasure so much, whether it was, you know, Mitch dying for his family legacy at the end of National Treasure 2, or more recently with Edge of History, how we learned about Jack Sadusky, Agent Sadusky's son, dying
Uh,
on the treasure hunt. And this is, I would be remiss if I failed to point out, this is called the Curse of Oak Island. So this idea of families being torn apart by these treasure hunts or just severely impacted by them is very alive and well, even in this docu-series, which is far more real than National Treasure is.
yeah, and I would say that they really hammered home the curse part when they started talking about what happened right before season 5.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, okay. So this is, I suppose you're thinking of, they literally arrive on the scene to start filming season 5, and they discover all of the island's like infrastructure, its roads were completely destroyed by storms that had happened in their off season. Woof. Like rough start.
Yeah. It stressed me out because I was like, are we just going to be figuring out how to deal with this the whole time? And thankfully we did not.
No, but we quickly had another problem to deal with in season 5, and this is where Laird the archaeologist comes in. I actually found this quite fascinating. We see the Lagina brothers receive a letter from the Canadian government, specifically the Canadian Cultural Heritage Agency, saying that like any metal detector hit that they find on the island will require a unique permit to dig, which is crazy.
It's like a lot of permits.
Yeah, it would, and then we find out, I mean, we don't see their meeting with the government because obviously they couldn't bring cameras in, but we find out later, and this is the fascinating part to me, that the government was apparently being pressured by the archaeological community to basically make things harder for them. And this is also, I think, a very clear indication of the show being successful because a lot of people are seeing this and it's raising alarm bells. Um, and so, how this turns into Laird as the solution is they basically come to this agreement with the government that if they hire an archaeologist, the archaeologist can get a one-time permit that allows this metal detecting and digging whenever. But anytime they dig, the archaeologist would have to be there.
Which, like, what? Just to make sure they're doing it safe?
But then by season 6, half the time Laird has to be there for them to dig, and other times they're literally like, hey, Laird, there's this very clearly man-made well, and we don't know how old it is or who put it there. Can we take the lid off and drain it? And Laird is like, sure, I don't care.
Yeah, I did. Maybe they just like started to be able to get away with it. Like maybe they were like, or they realized like they realized they being the archaeologists,
Yeah.
realized that putting this kind of pressure on the government to make this rule and everything wasn't actually going to stop our
I
team.
like to think that maybe with an archaeologist present for a while, he's like, "Ah, they're really like doing things legit. So like this is kind of a waste of everyone's time, you know?
Maybe.
Because I will say, and this came up for me later as well, I think they're super respectful of the archaeology and not wanting to destroy things, and things like that. I also just, I don't know, this came up near the end of season 6, another one of our disasters. The crane operators in Canada go on strike. And so,
Which, like, what?
I mean,
Like, I get that
fair.
it happens, but like in the middle of filming, that's gonna be a nightmare for the History Channel.
And you would think Rick and Marty, who've put all this money into having the cranes there, the infrastructure for the cranes, digging the holes, etc., and their time is dwindling. Mind you, people who are new here, they have to stop at a certain point each season because they are very far north. Everything freezes over and bad storms come in. So like, but instead of throwing any kind of fit or having any disdain whatsoever, they're like, "Yep, we just got to ride this out. We can't really interfere. They got to the crane operators got to do what they got to do," and I really respected them for that.
Yeah, this made me very, very pleased because I feel like if we're looking at this from a national treasure perspective, we look at like a Ben versus an Ian,
Mm,
and like Ian definitely would have been pissed.
yeah,
Um
yeah,
and probably just been like, I'll just do it myself.
yeah.
And Ben is the one who probably would have been like, well, like, yeah, we kind of have to do
You
it
know, workers'
the right
rights.
way. Right. Like,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really good point. Um, there were other disasters, like Rick ends up getting Lyme disease. Like, there's a whole lot that's going on in these seasons. More so, I think, than the previous seasons. I'll say that.
yeah, I think the number of roadblocks, no pun intended, for the
Yeah,
first one were many. I
yeah.
did appreciate though that after the beginning of season 5 where like they were really kind of going in on like, oh well, the storms, it could have been this curse and all that kind of stuff, it didn't feel to me like they hit on the curse aspect quite as much.
Emily, that's because whenever they're saying the curse, it's never the focus. They're just saying it to make drama. It's never the emphasis. So no,
I know, but it still annoys me when it's said.
oh, that's so dumb. That's so dumb. You know, people do believe in that
Sorry.
stuff, right? So you can't just poo-poo what people believe in all the time.
I mean, I can say that it annoys me when it's said. It doesn't mean that I feel any way about people who believe it.
Okay. So, but you're just going to be annoyed at the Laginas if they believe it, but you're not going to be annoyed at people because they believe it.
I'm not going to judge them.
Mm, okay. You sound like you're judging them. But let's move on. Shall we move to the actual treasure hunt component of these seasons?
Sure,
I
because this is where Emily gets lost.
really, this is where it gets good.
Always.
But this is where it gets. Let's do this. Let's hold the digging for the end because I think we should start with some of the theories that are relevant to these seasons. Um, the first one that comes to mind for me is our follow up on Xena Halpern. Do you remember her from the previous seasons?
Yeah, she was the one that had like that. There was like the really old map, right, of Oak Island.
Yeah, like a 1300s era Templar map purportedly of Oak Island. Um, we learn pretty early on in these seasons that the name Rochefoucauld was written in a note in the top corner of the map. And we follow up on this because the Lagina's local researcher is researching this name and finds that the Rochefocaulds were a family of crusader kings. Um, which is very relevant if one of the theories that they're pursuing for Oak Island is that it's related to the Knights Templar and a Templar treasure, basically. Um, one of the
100%.
things one of the things the researcher finds is 8 pages of a French ship's log from 1746, and the ship was from a fleet being led by a member of the Rochefoucauld family. And the log says that the ship or the fleet had to anchor during bad weather in the area of Oak Island because there was so much treasure on board these ships that they couldn't risk unsafe sailing. And then specifically, quote, it was agreed that a deep pit be dug and the treasure securely buried, the pit to have a secret entrance via tunnel from the shore, end quote. And Marty, when this is revealed to him by the researcher, he goes, what troubles me is how perfect this is. And I just gotta say, agreed.
True, but like, why would this be like? Why would somebody falsify that?
Because this is a centuries old legend at this point. I mean, the Oak Island money pit was first discovered in what was it, the late like 1790s? So this has been around a while.
Yeah, I guess if you want to throw someone off.
Or just, create trouble. Why do we feel that we need to validate any artifacts, right? Because people can make fakes, whether for monetary gain, for attention, what have you. But I thought that was interesting. We do learn in the middle of this sequence, I think early season 6, that Xena, who's apparently way more involved as a researcher for the Lagina brothers than we even knew, she passed away. So we have another death here. And she ends up leaving Rick all of her Oak Island research.
Very kind.
For sure. I
Like,
mean,
I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that cool. We got it now. Not cool that she died. Sorry. That was sad.
yeah. I mean, I think a bit about the I think of this in the context of the Gates family, to be honest. I mean, Xena is
Mm.
not Rick's mom, but you get this same sort of familial connection between these treasure hunters who have become very close. And I like to think that as the Gates family and National Treasure was pursuing all their Charlotte leads, for example, over the years, that was continually being passed down so that the next person didn't have to start from scratch. And that makes it so that Ben can eventually succeed in finding the real Charlotte. So I like to think that
Mm.
in some way, this is really going to help Rick narrow down the real history here, at least.
I mean, yeah, I personally, I liked this whole like theory aspect of the seasons. I can't just say
Okay.
season, both seasons. I
Yeah.
thought this was a very cool thread um to pull on.
So the thread ends up continuing to the end of season 6. I almost wouldn't bring this up if it weren't for the national treasure of it all because it hasn't gone anywhere yet. But did you catch how at the end of season 6, there's this other researcher that comes in and comments on the relationship between one of the Rochefoucalds and Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin? And this researcher says that whatever treasure was on Oak Island could have been used to finance the American Revolution. And I was like, this is so out there. But he goes on to
Mm-hmm.
say that before the Revolutionary War, the French people living in Nova Scotia were writing to George Washington trying to get him to make Nova Scotia the 13th colony because the founding fathers wanted 13 colonies because of the symbology around the number 13, because of Friday the 13th and that being the Knights Templar's downfall. And I didn't know this. I'm assuming, like, this is one of those things where I have to assume the history is correct because I'm not looking into it myself. Um, but if this
The
is all
Friday the
correct,
13th thing is
we
correct.
know that's right. Yeah, but I didn't know that there was this hope that Nova Scotia could be the 13th colony. I'm assuming if that is true, this is actually quite fascinating. Um because all of this sounds quite ridiculous unless the Knights Templar really did come to the New World before Columbus.
Maybe. I mean, it would be a stretch, but honestly, the fact that all of these things happen to like have these little bits of connection, it
Yeah.
feels very National Treasure. Not because of the fact that they're doing a treasure hunt, but like because of the way that National Treasure takes something that's true and
Yeah.
like finds some gaps and fills it in.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like is happening here.
Well, especially and then when they throw out these theories, you can always take them with a grain of salt, but once they show you something tangible that helps to make that connection and put some historical validity behind it, now you have my attention. And in this case, we do learn about this thing called the Evans Stone on Oak Island, which we've never heard about before, I guess because it's just never been relevant to, the search as we've seen it on the show. But there's this stone on Oak Island that has what's called the Appeal to Heaven flag. It's like a pine tree emblem
Yeah.
carved onto it. And we learn that apparently the Appeal to Heaven was commissioned by George Washington for the Continental Army. So if that really is what is on this stone, and my eyes, I will admit, it looks identical to me. Just saying.
Yeah. I didn't
That's
see flaws.
compelling.
It is very compelling. To the point where I was a little bit like, y'all were hiding the stone on
Well,
us, like that, just that it existed. Like I know it wasn't relevant, but like
I don't think they knew about this appeal to heaven thing connection
Mm.
before. And now they do. And I'm like, oh wow, and it's all founding father coded. It adds to, remember the conclusion I drew at the end of our last IRL? And I was like, I kind of have this feeling now that the pit beneath Trinity Church was kind of inspired by the money pit now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm feeling it even more now.
Could be. I mean, the signs point to yes. Or
Yeah.
heaven, depending on...
But shall we move on? How about we get to your buddy Gary Drayton? How about we get to our metal detecting storylines?
I mean, I like Gary. I don't... What is your hold on, what's your problem with Gary?
I don't have a problem with Gary. I really don't. But my thing, so he becomes like this main subplot in these seasons. Like constantly there's a cutaway to Gary out in the field metal detecting. I believe that Gary is either acting in that they found an object before and they're recreating the find, or he is almost unrealistically good at his job because he'll literally pull something out of the ground. It's still half covered in dirt. It ain't cleaned yet. And he immediately identifies it. He's like, oh, this is a crossbow from the Romans in the year 1100. And I'm like, how do you know that? And then he ends up being right. Sorry, I'm getting shrieky, but I was like, he's either incredibly impressive or he's faking it.
Yeah, so I will admit that, and this is also just part of the way that I view these shows, my impression was that they had found these things, and then he was acting as if it was the first time he had found them. Just because I think that, like, that probably happens in these shows, and it feels weird that he would know so much about these artifacts, like you said, that are half covered in dirt when he's pulling them out. But I think he still found them. And I think that's what I appreciated about him, and the way that he talked about the metal detecting and like, oh, well, if it's this beeping frequency, it means X, Y, and Z. And what, like that, I was like, oh yeah, no, that's cool. That makes sense. Good on you, Gary.
He's very good at his job. I think, and some of the most compelling storylines from these seasons come directly from his finds, in my opinion. So let's talk. There are 3 that come to mind for me that I think were most significant in terms of advancing our understanding of the history here, because much to Dave Blankenship's dismay, I really do think the most interesting part of this show is not actually the pursuit of the treasure, but trying to figure out the heck happened on this island. Because whether or not there's a treasure there, it is very clear that many civilizations were here at many points in time. And I personally believe, TLDR, spoiler alert, I very much think that this land was discovered pre-Columbus now. I do. But we'll get there. The first find that I found fascinating was a crossbow bolt that was like meant to puncture chainmail. And they find this in Smith's Cove. An antiquities expert says that it's a throwing spear from the Roman period dating from 1 BC to 5 AD.
Like, that's gotta be part, like, that's obviously was part of the treasure. Like,
I don't know.
I just, like, you know how we keep old stuff because we think it's cool?
For sure, but I mean, this is specifically a defensive thing, right? It's something that someone could just have on them in the same way that they could have a button on their jacket that could fall off. Like, if you're traveling to an unknown land, you need weaponry. You don't know what you're going to encounter. So maybe you just have this on you and it falls off. I don't know, you guys. But I was just like, this timing, 1 BC to 5 AD is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I know things that old exist, but it's crazy to like be like, have them be like, oh yeah, no, this is actually the thing is that old.
Yeah.
what?
And found in a location where it definitively should not be.
Right.
You know? So, another really cool find. At various places on the old Fred Nolan property, which they got the permission of Nolan's son Tom, they find jewelry. Old jewelry. So they find basically a metal frame for a cameo brooch and a garnet in a metal setting, which apparently, they again take these to experts and they date them from like the 1500s, 1600s. And then later at this other site called the McGinnis Foundation, they find this red glass stone in a gold-plated copper brooch setting. And this one, because of this apparently distinctive block twisted setting on the jewelry, it's likely pre-1330. So that makes it more than 300 years older than all the European coins they've found on the island.
So once again, old things, so cool. The twistiness of the metal, like, that is a sign of it being old. Like, so cool. But at the same time, now I'm having trouble following as I, Emily, am watching the show, because I'm like, but like, we're doing this, but we're also doing these other things, and in my head, it's very hard to keep track of.
Sorry, we're doing this and that. You're making yourself hard to keep track of. What do you mean?
Like, you know how they go back and forth in different episodes to kind of like side quests and main quests and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, they do. They are pursuing multiple things at the same time.
Right. This was one of the side-ish things that, to me, I was just like, this is too much. I can't keep it all straight.
Oh my gosh. Well, then let me remind you that in previous seasons, one of the many theories that has been floated for what could be hidden on this island is the French crown jewels from Marie Antoinette. And now they've found very old jewels, and it's like, that's cool. Not saying that it is those, but you're not saying it's not, right? Like, so, but all of this really does pale in comparison to the lead cross.
Yes.
They find a lead cross in Smith's Cove by metal detecting. It looks literally identical to these crosses that the Knights Templar, once they were imprisoned in France, that they carved into the walls of their prisons. And when I say identical, you're like, a cross is a cross. What do you mean identical? I mean, like, this has a very distinct, like, loopy, off-center shape at the top, and the arms are this, like, specific proportion to the rest of it. It is identical, and this absolutely throws everyone into a tizzy because an expert dates this cross to the 1300s. And this is, mind you, that is, in case you're not following, prime Templar treasure, like Knights Templar leaving Europe time period.
So, like, very, very realistic that this is from them.
And then to take it one step further, they go to a scientist at a museum in Europe, and they basically do this isotope ratio test that allows them to identify where this lead was mined. And the lead comes from deposits where historians know medieval mining took place in southern France, specifically the area of Rennes-le-Château, which, like, 3 seasons ago, the team actually visited in France because of its known Templar connections. This is actually mind-blowing, and to me, it's like, one of two things happened here. Either a Templar was on Oak Island and dropped this, or someone, again, like you said, someone was saving an old thing that they found, had it with them, and they dropped it, which is possible, but would make a lot more sense to me if this cross was made of gold or something else valuable.
Right, and not Like, unless it was something that was, like, handed down,
Right.
it would not make sense for it to be made of this same exact lead.
I just think, like, why would someone carry this around with them if it over, centuries after it was made, if it wasn't like some valuable item, which this is not a valuable item from like a precious metals perspective. It's valuable because it is very old and is, again, found somewhere it should not be.
Right.
Um, this to me was actually crazy. This was like a mic drop moment.
This was a mic drop moment for me, and it started to kind of like bring some of the other Knights Templar stuff into, I don't want to say perspective, but like it made me buy into those theories a little bit more.
Yeah. Yes. Me too.
Which is always helpful when you have like kind of multiple lines of evidence kind of
Yeah.
corroborating the one thing.
Well, especially before this season, they have dug up a lot of old coins, but none of them are like pre 1600s. Now we have multiple items that originated 1300s ish era. And so that's pretty compelling.
Yeah,
And we're going to
definitely.
get to a little more of that when we get to actually drilling some holes. So I I thought the drilling had decent results in season 5, so I was expecting a lot from season 6 in terms of drilling, and it was a major bust in season 6. So this is whiplash for me.
Yeah, I in general like the drilling. It feels tangible to me. Um but I agree, like season 5, it almost felt like the metal detecting, where it's just like very fortunate that we keep finding these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then season 6 was a little bit like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe we found them all.
So we're going to talk about one main new hole that they drill called H8, and they identify H8 in the Money Pit area. Again, for folks this might be your first NTIRL with us. Oak Island made history many years ago. Again, we talked about like late 1790s and then into the 1800s because random people found this giant pit they dug up this giant pit on the island because every like 10 feet they were finding man-made planks. There was rumors that these chests were pulled out of this pit, and as soon as they got down to the level where like an artifact led them to believe there would be some treasure, these flood tunnels started flooding with seawater, and no one has been able to like relocate that area since. And it's called the Money Pit because people have literally poured money into trying to find whatever the bottom of this pit is. So the Lagina brothers are trying to relocate the original Money Pit area. This new borehole H8 is determined because they do this drilling analysis where they do like a bunch of little proby holes and then pick one that seems like it's a good fit. I get why you do this because you want to like pull out see like, okay, I drilled this little hole. If I pull out a man-made object, this might be a good spot. But they're like, this will tell us exactly where the OG money pit is. And I'm like, why? Why? Because there are all these searcher tunnels that they keep encountering. How do you know you're not just pulling up something from a searcher tunnel?
Well, I think it's the combination of the holes. Like if they find enough, because of the way that the grid was laid out, I thought this was so cool. I don't know why, because they're literally just digging holes in a grid. But to me, this was like the most like science-y approach to this
Yeah.
problem, and accurate science, where it's like a lot of times you don't find anything,
Yeah.
but sometimes you do. But it's like the kind of the localization of where they find things in the holes that are kind of near each other is, I think, how they were kind of able, or at least they were theorizing that's how they'd find the money pit.
Well, once they identify that they're going to dig H8, they do find some really interesting stuff. To me, the most compelling were the pieces of human bone. And it's confirmed that it's bone using this technique called energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, or EDX. They keep calling it scanning electron microscopy. It is, but it's also not. You use the scanning electron microscopy to do the EDX analysis. I digress.
Mm.
They learn from the DNA analysis that they then do not only is these bones human, but they're from two different people. And they're able to do what I'm assuming is mitochondrial DNA analysis, to trace and say that one is from European descent and the other is from Middle Eastern descent. And their ages, or like the ages of the bone, are from contemporaneous time periods. So this is basically proof that people were there underground before the money pit was discovered, because again, money pit was discovered in the late 1700s. The dates on these bones are between late 1600s and early 1700s. So that is crazy.
It is crazy. And I think for me, the like weird thing was the idea of like, were these people the ones that buried the treasure, which feels unlikely, or were they people that were looking for the treasure? And I say it feels unlikely because if we're trying to like piece everything together and we think about the, you know, like the Templar, everything that was going on in the 1300s and just the very early time periods of some of the other finds, this is like much too late unless people literally lived there for like 400 years.
But at the same time, they have found a lot of evidence of, again, the 1600s, 1700s era in terms of the European coinage as well. So it's hard to say. Here's an example. What if the Knights Templar were there, but didn't put anything there? What if they were just exploring? What if they were Christopher Columbusing it? Do you know what I mean? Like, really?
I love that new verb.
It's possible that they were just there and didn't hide anything there, and people later hid something there. Like, that's why the history of this is so fascinating. Speaking of, the other crazy find, in my humble opinion, from borehole H8, they pull out something like a little, what seems like a torn piece of paper and something leathery. And when, again, they do the scanning electron microscopy with the EDX analysis, they can confirm that the former is parchment and the latter is like leather plus textile bound together in a way that bookbinding would have been bound together. And at this point, I'm like, holy guacamole, remember that theory that I thought was absolutely ridiculous, that Francis Bacon hid clues in Shakespeare's printed plays that point to Oak Island, and that Shakespeare's original manuscripts were buried on Oak Island.
And I was so excited when this happened because anything book related, I'm like old paper, I'm like, this is so cool. But if you remember, the Shakespeare theory was one that I was like into when we did the first bit of this show. And so I was like, we're bringing, yep, I see it. I can see connection. It doesn't have as much evidence, obviously, as everything else. But I was like, okay, Shakespeare, yes.
Well, here's the thing. To be honest, one of the reasons that I was never super into the Shakespeare theory is in part because I was like, how could you ever prove this? Books would have disintegrated by now. I mean, there's pieces of it right here, whatever it is, and that is absolutely wild to me. It also screams a little national treasure to me because think about what was in the Templar treasure. There was a lot of cultural treasure in addition to actual like gold and precious metal related things. When you talk about like the scrolls from the library at Alexandria. Exactly. And so the idea of knowledge being treasure is very national treasure. Dave Blankenship would never. He would be so mad if they pull out this treasure and it's a bunch of manuscripts. He will literally lose his mind.
I would love it. This is like, that's my level of like, yes, I think that knowledge is treasure. It's the friends we made along the way type vibes.
So for me, I personally feel that like by season 5, we're looking for the treasure at H8, but we're also searching the rest of the island just for these historic artifacts and clues about who was there and why. So these two very separate but related searches. The other way I just like disentangle the two seasons. Also, when we went like, okay, season 5 is good digging, season 6 is bad digging. But season 5 to me is the season of metal detecting finds, and season 6 is the season of Smith's Cove.
Yeah.
Which was pretty incredible to me. I was a big Smith's Cove skeptic until this season. They end up going all in here because of the lead cross. They're like, wow, if this 1300s era lead cross is in the cove, what else could be in the cove? So they install this massive dam so that they can literally drain the cove and excavate it.
Love this. This is the kind of stuff that we always need to be doing. Okay? Like, pumping water uphill. Not great.
To this day, you always comment on that in this show. You're like, yeah, and they were trying to pump the water up here. I'm like, I literally have no idea what you are talking about. It was so insignificant. It did not even like register in my brain.
It struck me as so weird, and they had trouble with it. This, to me, is a very rational approach. It's great. I'm like, yes, we're doing science. We are using logic, which I feel like sometimes they don't. And they're doing this in a smart way where they're also not just sending divers. I think that's part of what I liked a lot is like a lot of times they're like, oh, we'll just send this camera or like we'll send this diver. And it's like, well, then there's all this stuff in the way. Here they actually took steps to make it better.
You're talking in a lot of vagueness. So sorry, I'm a little lost. You're saying that you do not like when they send in divers, but you do like when they dig. I'm sensing a pattern. You like when they dig.
I do like when they dig.
Okay. Sorry, I got you. In this case, the digging definitely pays off because apparently Dan Blankenship, who, again, any newcomers here, Dan is Dave's dad, and Dan is the most...
Old.
He is very old. He is the most recent intensive searcher on this team before the Laginas got there. And so apparently he had found traces of structures in the cove, but had never really isolated them. But also, apparently there are way more structures underground in the cove than he knew about. So number one, they find a structure that Dan had previously found that he had called the U-shaped structure. It's basically a bunch of wood logs laid out in a U-shaped pattern. They all have Roman numerals carved on them, which I find interesting.
Maybe it was the order that they were put down in.
Could be. I was like, what if this is... I think they might have said this, but I also was like, I buy that. What if this was like an original dam that whoever came there first put in to create the box drains that apparently flood the zone? They flood the pit.
Wait, but that would actually make sense if they were like labeled too. Because if they used the logs to create this, right, and they knew how they were going to create this like box drain, essentially. Yeah. The logs might be like different lengths and stuff like that, and so they might label them so that they know kind of where to put like that. To me, it works.
For sure. But that's honestly not all they find. They might actually find one of the box drains because they find like two stones that are laid into like an A-frame type of shape with a triangle opening, which accords with historic descriptions of the box drains, and there's a coconut fiber layer.
The coconut fibers. Oh my gosh, this was another thing that I just loved I don't know why.
This is from previous seasons. It's more consistency with previous seasons and previous finds. They also find a concrete wall 8 feet below the surface of the cove. And then there's like 2 plugged rubber pipes near the wall. And I will say they promptly stopped asking about what this concrete wall is, which is rather interesting because they find more stuff and they don't ignore the other stuff, but they do ignore this. And that was strange to me.
Yeah, I've tried to stop figuring out the logic behind exactly why they do what they do.
My suspicion is that there's like stuff we aren't seeing, like they can make
Yeah.
tangible progress on all the wood stuff right now, but like the concrete stuff they can't. So like that's happening in the background. The wood stuff though continues because they find a wooden wall that no one has reported before. They find an L-shaped structure, and they find what is very clearly like a dock, or what they call a slipway for hauling ships out of the water.
So cool.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
initial reaction is like, why is no one carbon dating the slipway, the L or the U-shaped structures? And they finally do at the end of season 6. They use dendrochronology, which is the tree ring studies, and they're
I love
able
that.
to confirm that the slipway is made of red spruce from around 1771, which does predate the Money Pit's find. And it is contemporaneous with the U-shaped structure, which is also red spruce from 1769. So the question then becomes, and this is kind of where we end in season 6, frankly, is they're like, okay, in 1769, 1771, someone's building these wood structures. Are they depositing the treasure, or are they trying to retrieve the treasure? And everyone on the team except Marty, because he has, he just agrees to do some critical thinking. Everyone thinks it's depositor, but they just have literally no evidence of this.
I also thought depositor initially.
Well, no, it could be right, but like, why would you think that?
Just because I think so. I think what it is you want to go to the closest time period, like to the find of the Money Pit.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, because all of this dates to just a little bit before that,
Mm-hmm.
it would just logically, for some reason, seem to me as though like, oh yes, these people built it. But when you do critically think about it, it's kind of like, okay, they built it and hid it, and then somebody found it like 10 to 20 years later. Like,
That's the weird thing. And but then also you were questioning why the bones of the people from the late 1600s, early 1700s found in the pit. You were like, well, they would be retrievers or something. Like, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. The point is we can't know. And to me, it's very the what the team says is, well, if they were retrievers, they would have turned off all the booby traps. They would have turned off the flood tunnels, and they wouldn't have covered their tracks so clearly, like covering up all these structures in the cove. And I'm like, well, how do we know they covered the structures and the structures didn't just like fall down and then get swept under the silt with time?
right. And how do we know that they, like, how would they have known how to fix the booby traps necessarily?
Right. So, because they're assuming that if they're retrievers, they're like descended from the
Yeah.
depositors, which isn't necessarily true. So anyway, I thought the Smith's Cove exploration was fascinating. It gave me a lot of anxiety because I was getting the inkling that they were like, once our searching season closes, we're going to have to basically remove the dam that we put in and let everything fill back in. And I was like, why? Just keep renewing your permit. You did all this work. Please don't do that. I was getting so stressed out because I'm like, next season, are we going to come back
It's
and
just going to be building it again.
and the whole cove is going to be filled in? And I'm like, no, terrible. Sounds terrible. Anyway, we're almost done here. I just have to take a moment to acknowledge, because it broke my brain. This show in the first couple seasons brought in a lot of random theorists to share, like, this is what I think is hidden on the island. There was a lot less of that in these seasons.
Yes.
However, one of the people they brought in was this guy named Travis Taylor. And I'm bringing him up because he is the star of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, another show that I watch in my personal capacity that has nothing to do with National Treasure Hunt. So he comes on the screen. Actually, I had stepped away from my computer, and then I hear this voice, and I was like, that sounds like Travis Taylor. And then I get back, and I'm like, oh my God, it is Travis Taylor. My brain exploded. He presents this asinine theory about overlaying the constellation of Taurus onto Oak Island and a neighboring island. And like, he's like, look for points of interest where the stars of the constellation are, and he just looks like a massive kook. I mean, at one point, someone asks him a very logical question. Why did you orient the constellation like this on the map? And he was like, oh, I was trying to make all the stars fit. And I was like,
you know what? Edge of History vibes.
oh my God. With the star map?
That's immediately what I thought of. And then as soon as he said, I was trying to make all the stars fit, I immediately was like, what a waste of my time.
I was honestly bothered by this because he's actually like a very credible person for not this. Like he works for NASA. He was on like the special task force for UAPs that like the White House convened in the last 6-ish years. And he is an astrophysicist. So like this is not his realm. So I'm like, wow, are they soft launching him starring on Skinwalker Ranch in this episode? Because they're both History Channel shows. So then I looked it up, and Secret of Skinwalker Ranch premiered in 2019, which is the same year as his appearance in season 6.
Yeah. That must have been it. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. I was just like, I just had to bring that up because it actually broke my brain and made me really disappointed because I was like, no, like he's a legit guy. And on this show, he does not come off as a legit guy at all. Okay, before we get to our rating and recommendation, I wanted to share like 2 final impressions that I had that I'd like to present to you.
Okay, I'm ready.
The first one, the last 2 seasons of this show that we covered on our last IRL episode, I think I was like, I'm fairly confident at this point that we're talking about Spanish pirates.
You were really into the Spanish pirates.
Because all the evidence that they had from those seasons really pointed to Spanish pirates being there. And I don't think that they weren't there. But this set of episodes really has pushed me towards, like, maybe the Knights Templar actually did come to America first. So, like, maybe the Spanish pirates came centuries later looking for whatever the Knights Templar left there or what they thought they left there. But to me, it's very clear at this point that we are working through, like, discrete chunks of history. And that's what makes this so confusing, is you're finding artifacts now from the 1300s, the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s. And making that all fit is like this massive puzzle that is, to me, very National Treasure coded.
It is, yeah. And I agree. I do like the multiple kind of timelines in theory. Mm-hmm. It does confuse me. But I really like the Knights of Templar angle on this whole, I guess I was going to say season, 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Like that to me is like, I mean, I've always been interested because National Treasure.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, I dig it. No pun intended.
Which is saying something, because I seem to remember you being very skeptical of the Knights Templar theory in previous seasons.
Yeah, I mean, they have more evidence this season.
They have real evidence now, yeah. And that begs the question, this is actually leads well into my second point. If the Knights Templar were there first, if that is true, then it is true that people from Europe, quote unquote, discovered or were on the quote unquote New World before Columbus. And that really makes me think about who we trust and believe to tell the tales of history. Is it only academics? And this is where I actually think this is a fascinating question. No one can deny that the Laginas have found, for example, this 1300s era cross on Oak Island.
Right.
Will the finds made by the Laginas be scoffed at and have less impact because they're quote-unquote hobbyists and not academics? Who has to quote-unquote prove that someone was here before Columbus for our textbooks to change?
I mean, I guess the scientists.
But how can we control that? If the scientists weren't there and they weren't the ones who discovered the cross, does that mean the cross is invalid?
No, because the scientists are testing it.
But just because the scientists tested it and said we date this from medieval mines in Europe in the 1300s, no one is going around, like, there were not articles saying it is proof Columbus was preceded by other people. And so what this makes me wonder is, like, what is it, who finds the artifacts that determines whether the story is the historical record is changed? Is it the quantity of evidence that must be found that determines whether the story is changed? How many crosses do they need to find, for lack of better terms, for the textbooks to change? And what does
Mm.
this say about our elitism and the ivory tower?
That's a really good point. I think to me it just speaks to the fact that, like, maybe it didn't pan out in, like, as more in the next couple seasons, which would suggest that we need more than one cross, I guess, to kind of use that analogy.
But, like, what does
But it
pan
is a
out
good point.
mean? What does pan out mean? Because the cross was found, right? The cross was found, and yes, we don't know the exact circumstances. Like we said, it could have been someone dropped it when not long after it was made, or it could be someone
Right.
dropped it many years later. But we now have a preponderance of evidence that things from pre-Columbus time have been found on this island. For example, the jewels. And so all this makes me think, to really wrap up here, of the Gates family being ridiculed by the historical community in National Treasure, right? They're the kooky conspiracy theorists about the founding fathers and the Templar treasure, and in the fictional world of National Treasure, they end up being right.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that unless the Laginas find the Templar treasure on Oak Island, no one will believe they're right about the Knights Templar having visited Nova Scotia?
Maybe. I mean, look at Cross's Nostrum.
What
Like,
about it?
their whole vibe was to try to hide the fact that history could change.
Our
So, like, an edge of
interpretations of it can
history.
change, yeah.
Right. So, like, it wouldn't surprise me if, like, it's gonna sound terrible to say, but, like, maybe we all have a little Crossus Nostrum
Yeah.
in us.
In terms of our reticence to see an evolved version of the historical tale. I completely agree. To me, that's like a very interesting side plot here that is not part of the story, but is part of the story in my brain. So, with that, Emily, I am very curious. You were more interested in this show than you have been in the past. So, what is your rating? And do you recommend National Treasure fans watch seasons 5 and 6 of The Curse of Oak Island?
I was more into it, and then I was less into it. So I give it 4 out of 10 boreholes.
Okay.
Um, uh, for me, there's still too much that's happening at once with all the different kind of side quests. And with a show like this, where, like, there is some amount of production that is occurring, it
Mhm.
would be, I think, helpful if things were laid out in a more structured manner rather than just kind of going with, like, the individual finds.
Like, this is the Jules episode, this is the Cross episode, this is the Cove episode, like that.
Yeah, I think that, to me, because, like, we already know that it's produced, so I think that would help. That being said, I do recognize that the way that this treasure hunt is working is how treasure hunts work in real life, right?
Yeah.
And I think ultimately the reason I gave it a 4 out of 10 is because I'm still coming back to my point from kind of the last NTIRL that we did with this, where I prefer the treasure hunt after everything is either put together, or I feel like I can be solving it with the team. And because there are so many theories going on right now, I don't feel like I can be part of solving it. I don't think that's a bad thing for the show. I just think it's a reason why, like, I like National Treasure as much as I do. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you would need to buy into the idea that you're not helping to solve it, but you're taking the evidence presented about all the different theories and deciding after a given season which theory you personally believe in the most, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So
So what about you?
this was tough for me. I thought the cross and the bones were epic in season 5, and the Smith's Cove excavation, epic in season 6. And if those finds were the sole focus of each season, I do understand why they can't do that, so don't at me. But if they were, I think this would have been phenomenal and literally history rewriting. When these sort of significant finds, though, feel watered down by other trails, like the dead ends and the things to pursue next season, etc., I feel like they lose some of their punchiness. And I think that is actually kind of getting along with what you were saying, where I'm okay with that because I do like seeing the process, warts and all, which includes the dead ends. But it does water down the punchiness and the impact of some of these finds. So I'm going to cumulatively give these seasons 5 out of 10 previously unknown structures in Smith's Cove. I would say that if you as a National Treasure fan are intrigued by the possibility of Europeans reaching the New World before Columbus, then these seasons are definitely for you.
Yeah. Fair enough.
All right. I think we've done it.
I think we did. So, y'all, that was a lot. It was a
Yeah.
lot to take in. So, reward us for our work. Please leave us a rating and review. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow us on X and Instagram at NT Hunt Podcast. Please do any, preferably all of the things.
Yeah. And you guys, we just haven't had quite enough of the Curse of Oak Island yet because we are going to do seasons 7 and 8 of this show for our next NTIRL episode coming in the second half of season 13. But until then, you guys, I'm Aubrey.
And I'm Emily.
And thank you so much for joining us on our National Treasure Hunt.